good for us. Good for us getting out of those days of using camp to prove toughness. That just doesn't make sense, and the data says it's not a good idea. And then I do think the other thing different from when you played and when I got into the league was that training camp was the right definition. That's what we were doing. You were drinking beer in the off season, claiming to be working out, not doing much, and we were training guys. You know what I mean? It was training camp. That's what it was. Well, nowadays our guys come in. We got 90 guys. Is there a chance that 2 of them are not in great shape? Yes.
Really?
88 of them are really good, like crazy good shape. And so the word training camp really is not. That's not what this is anymore. This is much more like, you know.
But playing in the NFL today, it's about being a professional too. And one of the great professionals in the NFL is our friend Rich McKay, who's the CEO of the Atlanta Falcons. And he joins us right now. Rich, I want to show you something right out of the gate. You ready?
Ready.
Look at this. Leroy Selman.
Yep.
To Dan, best always. What a guy, huh?
Dan, I don't think people realize, first of all, he was a great player. But more importantly, he was an unbelievable human being. I mean, Leroy was just, God almighty, you just never saw him without a smile on his face. And I didn't care if we were in a locker room. I grew up with him, losing 26 games in a row with my dad. It's the hardest time of our lives. And every time my dad had a phrase, he used to say, you ever feel bad, just go stand by Leroy and put a smile on your face. And it was just because that's who he was, just an incredible guy. I'm so jacked he got in the Hall of Fame. It would have been so disappointing if a guy whose career was cut short because of a Pro Bowl game, remember he got hurt in a Pro Bowl, didn't make it, but he did make it, which is fantastic.
I tell people this all the time. Yeah, people don't realize Leroy was like 41-2 at Oklahoma, and you guys had won all those national championships at USC. You go to the Bucs, you start losing it. I remember talking to your dad, and I go, "How did you handle that?" He goes, "Horribly."
He's right. He did. You know what's crazy? I'm fortunate enough in the football world that I've had a million, cool moments. But one of the coolest moments was 16 years old in Tampa, in a van, go to the airport and pick up Leroy and Dewey Selman to arrive in Tampa for rookie minicamp after we drafted him. It was really cool. I still remember, those guys were. Dewey Selman is a hell of an individual, and for a guy that didn't have any of Leroy's ability, he was a good football player. So I'm a Selman fan.
Absolutely. Hey, Rich, before we get into some of the nuances that some of the fans may see this year with the play on the field, your Falcons, how tough was it to let Matt Ryan go and, the relationship that you had, the organization had, Matt had in Atlanta? How difficult was that process to send him to Indianapolis?
Hard. It's hard, Dan, because, I was here when, the franchise was doing pretty well. Everything was in a good place. We had the Michael Vick situation hit us. It just really set us back. And then, in that Michael Vick year, which is the 07 season, I hired Bobby Petrino, something, Dan, that I don't sleep at night. I don't go to bed if I go to bed at 10, I don't fall asleep till midnight. If I go to bed at midnight, I don't fall asleep till 2 because I just can't get over it. But that was so hard on our fan base. Here's the guy, Michael Vick, kind of the face of our franchise. We're a good team. We got a chance to be a Super Bowl contender. He's gone. All of a sudden, Bobby Petrino's here. The whole thing is just off the rails and in the ditch. And, here comes this skinny kid from Boston College showing up. You look like you weighed 180 pounds, soaking wet, and just a great football player. Great person, great leader, did so much for the fan base, for our franchise, for our team, and for our community. Sarah and Matt are really good people, good parents, everything you want. But the time was right for the franchise. We have a new coach. We have a new GM. We've obviously made a lot of changes last year. We're making more changes this year. So, at some point it is the right time, and it was the right time, but hard. Yeah, it was hard.
Arthur Smith. Rich, tell me about him. You see a lot of new face NFL head coaches, the Kevin Stefanskis, the Brandon Staley's, the Nick Sirianni's in Philadelphia. I mean, there's a new wave of going towards these guys who work closer with front office than, say, the other old school guys that were like this. This is my way. You guys get the personnel. There seems to be more of a collaboration. Is that the intriguing thing about Arthur Smith and today's NFL coaches on what you guys are all looking for today?
Dan, it's so hard when you. I've interviewed a few and been through a few coach search processes, and you have a lot of. You draw up a job description. You have a lot of traits you want. You have all these things, but in the end, there has to be a fit, right? And the fit has to start with the coach and the owner, because the owner, is the owner of the football team, and this is their asset. And so I start that way. But for us, for Arthur Blank and myself, what was easy about Arthur Smith was, young, energetic, very smart, grew up just in a really cool situation, in that he grew up the son of Fred Smith, founder and CEO forever of FedEx. And yet that wasn't who Arthur wanted to be. He wanted to be Arthur Smith, right? He wanted to be a football coach. He started as a GA. He went down the college GA path before he went to pro. I mean, everything you did the hard way, he did the hard way. Never asked for any easy anything. So Arthur stood out because the other thing that was interesting, Dan, is that, as you may remember, we let our coach and our GM go after we were 5 weeks into the season. We were 0-5. So we had plenty of time to set the search up, to do the research. And when we did the research, it was pretty easy to see that Arthur Smith was going to be a candidate, a really good candidate, because everywhere you went back to, whether it was in the Redskins, whether it was the Titans, whether it was in his college days at North Carolina, it was all, hey, this dude's a really hard worker. He's really smart, and he doesn't enter the room with his ego. That's not what comes in first. What comes in first is intellect. And so I'm an Arthur Smith guy. I've been very impressed with what I've seen. He and Terry Fontenot bonded with head coach GM in a good way. So I'm proud to have him leading our franchise. And and another thing he does, Dan, that's really good, is his work ethic off the charts. And it always helps when you work hard.
Absolutely here. I had a conversation a couple days ago with Mike Vrabel, and I love him, and I was all setting it up to talk to you, Rich. I got to tell you, and what happened with Ryan Tannehill in Miami, I think it kind of like maybe gives another lifeline to some of these quarterbacks that maybe it doesn't work out in one particular position, where back in our day, Rich, when it started, a quarterback didn't work out at that place. You thought this guy was garbage or he was a bust, and look what Tannehill's done in Tennessee. He's 30-13. And I talked to Mike Vrabel about Marcus Mariota, and he goes, let me tell you something. One of the hardest things I ever had to do was take the job away from him, because he's so well revered in our community. He's a great guy. He's first guy in, last guy out. He goes, and he's rooting for him to have success in Atlanta. I'm a fan of him, Rich. I love the kid. Just give me a little bit on how that's working out for him right now.
Well, I think he says it best, right? This is an opportunity to restart his career and a restart as a starter. And he is not, there's nothing he's leaving on the table, Dan. He's working his tail off. He's got a good relationship with Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith was with him, in Tennessee when they made the decision to play Tannehill. And so, that was a hard time for Marcus. And yet when Marcus had a choice of where to go this year, and he had plenty of choices, he picked here. That says something about Marcus and about the way he handled the situation in Tennessee. So he's not his practice habits, to Vrabel's point, to Coach Vrabel's point, his practice habits, his work habits, his leadership, all really, really positive. And I really like where he is in his career, and that he is viewing this as, hey, this is my opportunity to restart. This is it. I'm going to reset right here. So we'll see what he's got. And so far, so good.
Rich, finally on the Falcons here, patience. How hard is it to have that when, I thought the kid that you had there last year, the kid Patterson, the running back, that was a gold mine. The kid Pitts, sorry, he's a Gator, I get it, but I thought he was a stud. I mean, there's pieces I'm seeing that you guys are putting together here, but how hard is that to sit there and have the patience when, look, you want to win, The organization wants to win. Arthur Blank wants to win. The community wants the team to win. It's a centerpiece in your city. How hard is that?
Really hard because, listen, we're not in the business of trying not to do anything other than win football games, period. That's the reason we're in the game of football. And our fans don't wake up every day saying, boy, I hope we're good in 2 years. Man, that would be good. I'd really like to be good in 2 years. Dan, nobody wakes up and says that. You got to deal with the realities of change. And so for us, we knew in changing the coach and the GM that you're going to change schemes. And when you change schemes, all of a sudden players don't fit as well. I mean, you played inside DT. When you change schemes and you go from one gap to two gap, Dan Sileo, that used to be a one gap player, is going to have to hit two gaps. All of a sudden, it's not going to be so good. That's happened to us, right? And then that causes a reset with some of the personnel. But I think the one thing is where you feel comfortable, and you hope the fans feel comfortable, is just see the progress. Just see the players that are getting added. Just see how they fit and see yourself getting better. We won 7 games last year and really had a chance down the stretch to stay in the mix and the discussion. We're looking forward to this year. I can just assure you of that.
Man, I tell people that all the time. I mean, look, I didn't help myself in Tampa, but when they brought me there and said, let's play nose, I went, what's that? I never played a nose. I go, I mean, I'm a three technique and a one technique guy.
Yeah.
Get up the field and make plays. I don't know. Here, let me get into, Rich, what nuances do you think the fans will notice this year? You're the chairman of the NFL competition committee. What nuances do you think that they'll notice most of all of some of the changes that were made for this year's play?
I hope not a lot. I think the game, Dan, and I brought my competition committee book here in case you were going to ask me stats, but the game is really in a pretty good spot. We measure the game, competition committee-wise, I should say. We measure the game, not on popularity, not on television ratings, not on that. We measure the game on, okay, what are the metrics that the fans have cared about for 40 years? They're pretty simple, right? Their yards per game, their passing yards per game, their points per game, their penalties per game, right? They're all those type of metrics, and those metrics for our game right now are really good. They really are, and that has led us to having really good quality football. I think the only big change that we made rule-wise this year, we made a bunch of nuances in the back of the book, just on make sure we're looking at illegal conduct. There's certain penalties that we've got to make sure we're always looking at. But I think that the change in the overtime and the change in the playoffs, they're not going to see it. Hopefully we don't have overtime in the playoff game, although we'd be happy to be in one. That just the idea that both teams will get a possession there, that was a big discussion. Probably the biggest discussion we had this offseason was, okay, what are you going to do with the overtime rules? Our overtime game right now is really pretty good. The quality of the game's good. The results are okay. But in the postseason, it was broken. We had 12 games since we made the rule change. We had 12 games that went into overtime in the postseason. 10 were won by the team that won the coin toss, 2 by the team that lost the coin toss. That just didn't feel fair to us. So that's a substantial change. Otherwise, our game, knock on wood, is pretty good. Now, Dan, what happens in our game, and just so you see why we make so many changes over the years, everybody's like, why do we have so many rule changes? Well, our coaches are really smart, and our athletes keep changing, right? The athlete that you were when you played is a different athlete today. Just a bigger athlete, right? Just a bigger man.
Faster.
And so all of those things, that causes us to change the rules. That'll always motivate us because, one thing that defensive players and defensive coaches don't like to hear, but accept is, remember, when we look at the scales of justice, which is offense and defense, we don't look at them this way. I hate to say it, but we look at them a little that way. And the reason we look at them that way is so do the fans. We don't want a 1-0 soccer game. We don't want a 2-1 soccer game. We have point targets. We want to get to 45 points a game. We don't want to ever go below 40. When we start to creep down, that's when you see us make rule changes. When defensive coaches get creative, invent new defenses. When Pete Carroll left USC, went to Seattle, created the cover 3 in a different way that most people had played it, and just started absolutely slowing people down. Guess what? The rules got modified a little bit. So that's why when we make changes right now, knock on wood, we're in a good place. I don't think they're going to see a game that's much different. One of the things that we have focused on in the last 3 years is a lot of times we talk about time of game. And so is it 3:05? Is it 3:04? Is it 3:06? Meaning 3 hours and 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. That's a target, but the real target is pace of game. How much lag time are we having? Because the one thing the fan in the stands and at home tells us is don't have too much dead time. Don't have too many stoppages. Just don't. And that's why we tried last year to allow the officials to have help in their ear on certain plays. That was not noticeable by you, except I will tell you, it improved our officiating. It lessened the amount of replays, and it quickened the pace of the game. All positives. I think year 2 of that program will be better.
Rich, couple things on the players here that I love that I think goes into the competition of the game here. So now we're going to see where players are going to have the opportunity to go on IR and then go on it twice this year. And to me, is that because of the health of what you're looking at with the players so that you can, give an opportunity for these teams not to have to go onto the open market? And I also want to throw this into it, and I could tag that question on, is that did you ever think about adding another bye week because of the additional 17th game that we're now having? I know you took an exhibition game away, but having the ability to go on IR twice in a year instead of just once, and maybe an additional bye, could that be something that we're looking at down the road?
Let's separate the two, okay? On the going on IR, right? So the old school people, right, like myself, the George Youngs, the Bill Polians, we were all in the committee together, and then I'm still on the committee, but I can still hear George talking to me, and I can hear Bill talking to me. We always were concerned as personnel guys. We were always concerned with this thing called stashing. What stashing was, Dan, is it was a team that what they would do is they would just hide players. So they'd say, hey, Dan, in this last preseason game, just kind of
sniper. Here's the word, sniper.
Yeah. So we always woke up and we got worried about that, right? I don't think we're worried about that anymore. I think what we look at, that's why the practice squad is 16 players. Heck, when we started it was 5. Okay. And Bill was concerned about 5. I mean, we started with 5. So the reason is because we kind of look at it as though if you're a team and you've built this ecosystem and you've developed these players, it's okay that we don't have to put everybody subject to waivers. We don't have to put everybody on the street. And then what we figured out is if you put too many people on the street, you don't have this big practice squad, and you don't let people come back from IR, then what happens is week 10, we have 2 injuries in a game. We have to go call and say, hey, Dan, okay, you haven't played since training camp. Are you in good shape? I know what your answer is. I'm great shape, working out every day. Here you come in, you work out, you look good. We sign you. You get hurt, I don't know, 3 plays into the game because you're not ready to play. You haven't played in, 12 weeks. You haven't done anything. But, I just like the system of IR and the return from IR, because when you get hurt, you were training with us. When you're hurt and you're on IR, you're training with us. Okay, you're staying in shape. Then we bring you back in practice. Then you play. Your chances of getting hurt are much lower than the guy we get on the street, and the quality of your play much better. You know our scheme. You know what our calls are. You know what our coaches are asking of you. You know the players that are playing around you. So to me, I think the old school way I looked at it before of concern of stashing, I'm not sure we saw that right. I like the fact that now the Falcons developed this group of players, and we can retain those players. We now have the right, Dan, under the CBA and our agreement with the union, of our practice squad players, we can move them up to our active and play on game day 3 times during the year freely. And I mean freely only this. We're still going to pay them like they were regular players, right? Not practice squad pay. They get paid regular pay. But the other thing is that we don't have to put them on waivers and subject them to the whole league. So I can activate you on Friday. You can play in the game on Sunday. And on Monday, you revert back to the practice squad. That has, again, helped the quality of our game. So I do think that our partners, the union, has done a good job with getting with us and saying, okay, let's be in the jobs business. Let's make our ecosystem bigger. And then let's think about the fact that those people that we develop within our own system have a lesser chance of getting injured, which means the quality of our game improves.
Rich, 2 last questions here for you. And please help me out on this because, I'm watching the Eagles practice. We kind of cover the Eagles here. And, they're off today. They were off the other day. I mean, look, the Ray Perkins 3-a-days. Hey, listen, I get
totally
it.
Different.
Your
totally
pops, different. 3-a-days.
Totally different.
Please help me out on this here, because I looked at what you guys collectively bargained, and what I saw what was different this year. You actually have increased more times in pads this year than maybe what you have in the past to be able to give those guys more chances. I mean, Rich, is that just the modern day NFL now, where you're just not going to see these massive practices that you and I used to go through back
totally
in the day?
Different.
It's a new NFL, right?
Doesn't even Arthur Smith and I were talking today during a break, and people that played 8 years ago, not 15 years ago, not 12, I'm talking 8 years ago, would not recognize training camp today. It's just different, way better, way safer. There's way more. Dan, the biggest difference for me, competition committee wise, and then, I've had the privilege of being on the working group that negotiates on the CBAs. The biggest difference in dealing with all these issues is we actually have data. We know everything. We know if we put you in this position and we put you too many times in this position, your chance of injury goes up. So you know what? We're going to reduce that. And yet we're going to increase other things. So I just think we're way smarter today with our medicine, our data, and how we're going to use it to try to make football safer. And it doesn't mean that football is not a tough guy sport. It is, but it does mean that we can do a lot of things better. I just know that we used to start training camp for, I don't know, this is probably my 50, I think it's my 55th training camp. My first camp, I was 6 years old. Going to Mike Garrett was the running back, won a Heisman Trophy. So that's 65. So don't, but that's when I think about that, Dan, think about that every camp I saw from that point forward really started the same, which was within the first 2 days, you went down in the red zone and you found out who the men were. That's what it was. Remember, you went down to red zone, you said, okay, ball on the 2-yard line. Let's see the defense stop them. And we'd go in there and run, I don't know, 15 plays and you go and you think today, we don't do any of that. We don't even do red zone. We used to do it the first day, and then you'd do. I'd go to Florida when Steve Spurrier, who was not the hardest coach there was. He was an easier go. He would do Oklahoma drills. Tim Ruskell and I would go just so we could watch Oklahoma. It was crazy what went on, and you know what? It's a prohibited drill now. You're not even allowed to do it. Good for us. Good for us getting out of those days of using camp to prove toughness. That just doesn't make sense, and the data says it's not a good idea. And then I do think the other thing different from when you played and when I got into the league was that training camp was the right definition. That's what we were doing. You were drinking beer in the off season, claiming to be working out, not doing much, and we were training guys. You know what I mean? It was training camp. That's what it was. Well, nowadays our guys come in. We got 90 guys. Is there a chance that 2 of them are not in great shape? Yes.
Really?
88 of them are really good, like crazy good shape. And so the word training camp really is that's not what this is anymore. This is much more like, getting ready, dress rehearsal reps, as opposed to training these players to get into shape. They're in shape.
Rich, I'll tell you, man. So when I played at Miami with Jimmy, and so those practices were pretty intense, obviously. But so I get up there with Ray Perkins, man. Pepin Root Stadium to me was like hell. I had never went into a place, and you had these little like air conditioning units that were in your wall. I'm in there with John Cannon. We're sitting in there, and I'm going like, we're gonna have 3-a-days. We're sleeping under a tent. If you remember, Ray would have us. You're sleeping under that tent, and we're doing 3-a-days. I mean, now that I'm hearing you talk about it, you have the intel. You think there's less injuries now today at the start of the season than when it was back when we were going through all those 2-a-days the way they are?
Not even a question.
Huh.
Dan,
okay.
I'm wrong. We have data. We have, and we can. What happens is at the start of the season, the one thing we get at the start of the season that we are going to keep drilling down in is we do get a lot of soft tissue injuries in those first 2 to 3 weeks. And the reason is because you can't simulate game speed in the preseason.
Right.
You know, you don't. The vested vet that's a really good player, he can look like he's really hauling and really giving it everything, but he's going 80%, right? In most practices, 85%. Now all of a sudden, here you are, the lights are on, it's game one, he's going. And guess what? Might be going for 45 plays, full speed. That, there's no question we get some injuries from that, because in preseason, what did he go? 20 one time and maybe not play the other 2 games? So yes, there's some of that. But as far as the serious injury, as far as the knees, as far as the real injuries that will, you know, take a season away, I think the numbers are substantially better, no question. And then the other injury that we're always going to pay attention to, Dan, is to be concussions. And our concussions last year, you know, continued to be that 30% down from the peak when we made a lot of changes to the rules and the helmets. And we're not going back to those numbers again. We'll do what we need to do to stay down. And I think preseason numbers are really going to come down over time.
Okay. Well, Todd Lewicki told me to tell you to say hi. Okay.
Todd is a great guy.
He's a dear friend of mine. And I said to Todd, I go, you know, McKay's going to be the next commissioner of the National Football League. And then this is what Lewicki said. Dude, nobody's leaving a gig like that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Todd is he's a Mr. Hockey again. He's back to Mr. Hockey. Good for him.
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
Guy. Great guy.
Super
Todd's
guy. Hey,
guy.
Rich, have a great year. Have a safe camp with all your guys. Thank you so much for spending so much time. It's going to be do you agree, Rich? This is probably going to be one of the most entertaining years that I can remember. You got the Brady send-off potentially. The great thing about the NFL is, too, because the way you guys set it up from worst to first, I mean, the draft, the schedule, you always look at the lowest teams have to be improved. You never let a team sit in the toilet as long as some of these leagues. The greatest thing about the NFL, in my opinion, Rich, you just don't know who's going to win it. You have your idea, but that's the beautiful thing about the competition.
Competitive balance, Dan,
isn't it?
Competitive balance. The two, you know, there was a phrase when I first got on the competition committee called parity. And a lot of the commentators said, oh, the NFL's got a problem. They got too much parity. Well, you know what? We changed the phrase to competitive balance because it sounds better. It's really the same thing, but it's a great thing. The idea that every team, every fan wakes up and says, you know, my team's got a chance is fantastic. Because in baseball, and there's many challenges in other sports where they can't say that. Ours, you can say that, and it's really cool.
Absolutely. Rich, great success to you. Tell Mr.
Right,
Blank hi. I said hi to everybody there. Thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this, my friend.
Talk to you down the road. See you, bud.
You got it. That is the great Rich McKay, the CEO of the Atlanta Falcons. And boy, man, that was really a great conversation to tell us a little bit about the success of the National Football League and where it's going. And hey, listen,